Hello and welcome, this is AlchemistExe, and today I'm going to be talking about the current score challenge quest. This isn't something I normally do, but because for whatever reason I decided I wanted to go for 20k, just to see if I could, and especially really put Eins on trial, because I don't have him max limit broken yet, but he's getting pretty close, and in most cases, unless they're like hard locking the content away from using him, he tends to be really effective. And to really drive that point home, he is not being boosted by a leader skill at all in this quest. Now, he's not going to carry it as hard as Dios, who does have the leader skill. This is also a more generous map to light units. That is like the bonus element, so the more light units you use will be the better. Naturally, it is made for Agatha technically, but because Agatha's kit is very general, just kind of AoE magic, but without any real specific mechanics behind it, that it's not a very difficult level to clear with units who aren't Agatha, which is a good thing. If it was like you needed Agatha to clear it, I wouldn't really think that the level was really worth talking about. It'd just be kind of, it's just advertising at that point. But I don't find that to be the case here. And so I want to talk about this clear because it is partially taking advantage of the mechanics, which I am using Dios, and as a light unit, that's the element that they want you to be using. So if you really wanted to go for as high a score as possible, then you would want a mono light team. But I don't think that's really worthwhile. You're going to see that this is going to be a 20k score, and this is not a mono light team. So just to go over the first wave, they basically exist to try and waste turns because they have an auto heal on them. They'll basically full heal every turn, so you want to kill them very quickly. So I used Eins to just one shot 3 out of the 4, and then I put disable heal on the 4th, and then end of story there. Next up in this wave, we have these frog enemies, and in my opinion, I think they're the most annoying enemy in the entire map in terms of what they do. If you noticed the damage Eins was going to do, it would have one-shot them, but the field that they put up nullifies buffs on them, so you can't charge up and kill them. They're basically immune to single target attacks, and then they have high resistance to anything that's not magic, and that is pretty much why Soul is here. Like, aside from Memento group synergies with him and Eins, that's not particularly significant. His ability to do a lot of magic damage and to have most of that come in the form of AoEs is the reason why Soul is here. As you can see, he's able to just one-shot them. No charge up needed, and he is basically our resident Frog Slayer. Now, Mattia, on the other hand, is our resident Octopus Slayer. So the thing with these guys, they pretty much function like most other octopi do in other maps where they want to blind you and then do more damage to you when you are blinded. They will take less damage from anything that's not light, but the thing about Mattia is that she just does so much damage that it doesn't really matter that much, especially if you are critting, then they're pretty much going to be toast. Now, Eins here is going to take advantage of his crazy stop mechanic. Now, I have done this level many times, and most of the times, this is the only time the thing procs, but that's okay. This is when it matters most, just because Soul just can't take out the frogs that quickly, so having Eins to get rid of the other two, and then Soul will be able to get rid of the other ones with his spells. But the other thing I was going to say about Mattia is that she has a reactive that auto-veils, much like Eins does. And so given that CC is such a large issue in this map, they kind of take care of that on their own. And then in the case of Mattia, she's tanky enough that even if she gets hit while she's blinded, it doesn't really matter too much. Now, I should talk about the amorphous devil guys. They have a fairly nasty preemptive counter that will knock you back. However, if you're up against a wall or if you're up against a significant enough height difference, then it doesn't matter, you won't get knocked back. Or you could just attack them from any square that isn't all around them, so adjacent and diagonal. They're also immune to alchemic effects while also doing alchemical effects to you. So you could bring somebody who cures them or somebody who can prevent them like Malvili. However, from trying multiple parties in this map, I found it was easier to just take the hit and just go through it. Eins and Dios tended to be the most risk for alchemy crash, so their attack gets down, but because they heal on crits, they can get rid of it fairly faster, and you can also use the jewels that you want to stand on anyway for points to help expedite getting rid of that. And then if you get alchemic frozen, something else will hit you soon enough, or it'll just wear off. So another thing I wanted to talk about just in general, because now that we've introduced almost every enemy type except for the dogs, which we'll get to them once they spawn, I just wanted to talk about the general process for like how the game is judging basically how you get a high score. The main thing, the number one thing, is just speed. Like, don't worry about killing all the enemies. You definitely want to kill groups of enemies at once, and you want to do lots and lots of damage. That will only help you. But when it comes, if you have to choose between killing more enemies and getting it done faster, it's better to get it done faster. I've tried each version. I've tried ones where I killed every single enemy on the map, but it took like maybe 10, sometimes less than 10 turns longer. And the difference in score that had, like getting a lower score, it was very, very noticeable. So definitely just go as fast as you can. So a team like this, which is very capable of doing a lot of damage, and a lot of that damage comes in the form of AoEs, is going to be very helpful. It's one of the reasons Matia is just such a good unit to have, it just in general, but you know, for quests like this that have tons of enemies, and you need that AoE. And then other units who maybe they don't work quite as potently, like Soul. Soul is very, very tanky. So this is not a map where dying is a huge concern compared to the last score challenge quest. Dying was a much bigger concern, but that doesn't mean that you're invulnerable. Like I had runs where Eins was usually the most at risk because he's got the least HP of everyone here, but I even had one particularly bad run where Dios ended up dying. Just like I was experimenting with different placements on the map, and there was just one case where that happened, and that's very, very rare. I don't often have situations where Dios is ever in any real danger. So it definitely can happen, so it is something to be aware of. Okay, so we're finishing up this next wave, and as soon as the last octopus is dead, then the next wave is going to spawn. So I found that you don't have to have like a complete clockwork like understanding of the map, but having a very general understanding of like, this is where I want to be when X wave starts, it does help quite a bit, because if the character that is going to initiate the transition to the next wave is like last in the turn order, then you're losing a few extra turns, and for a map like this it matters quite a bit, especially with how big this map is, and because it's a giant donut, and so you can't sometimes take what would be the shortest path between 2 points, because you have to go all the way around. And then I wanted to say one thing about Eins, is that I basically kept him in the front half of the map, because there are height instances where without boosting his jump, he can't get to them. Now, he is able, of teleporting, so he could just cross the gap by teleporting, but then the teleport also boosts his jump. So that is something to be aware of, but then he'd have to use it again later, so I found it easier just keep him there. So, the dogs here. The Cerberuses are basically anti-dex units. They will do damage that scales with your dex, so it's basically like an anti-Edgar, anti-Ananji type of mechanic. But because the other enemies, the frogs, I forgot to mention this before, they lower the range of anything that is range extendable, so basically missile. They'll screw over missile units by making them have 0 range. So odds are you don't really want to be using dex scalers anyway, so it's not a huge issue, but if you, for whatever reason, maybe had somebody who scales off of multiple stats, one of them being dex, I would either keep them away from the Cerberus or kill the Cerberuses fast. They're fairly tanky, and they have a stacking buff every time you hit them. They are not a problem for a unit like Dios. Dios can make fairly short work of them. And then those smaller dogs, They are not as big of a problem as some of the other enemies. However, when their health is full, they are going to be very hard to hit. So attacking from behind is pretty much a necessity, or using 100% hit attacks. And then if their health gets low enough, they'll do a very strong self-destruct attack. I've had instances where a unit was able to fully eat the attack, so it's not going to one-shot you necessarily, but it's better to just get them over with before that happens, just in case. Because some of these enemies, while they might not hit hard by themselves, if enough of them get turns in a row, they might be able to kill you. So better to avoid that, because if a unit dies, then you're going to get a point reduction that is most likely going to reduce your ability to get to a 20k score completely. So it's better just to not have anyone die. So another thing about the amorphous devil guys is that they will respawn once. But otherwise, it's nothing too special. Basically, just keep spamming the AoEs and they will keep dying. And then finally, basically the boss of the map is going to be that unfortunately designed KKK-looking dude who I think made their debut in one of Neka's quests. But they are going to absorb the first element you hit them with, and this is just yet another reason to love Mattia. Mattia has water element attacks in her kit. Nobody else in the party is going to be doing water elemented damage, so now he absorbs water and he won't absorb light, wind, or dark. So basically got that element nullified. Now, if you are trying to do this with a mono light team, then Zyne could be a pretty good way to do that. I'm thinking of Zyne Link in particular, although it's probably possible to do regular Zyne if you're invested enough in him. But for Zyne Link, he's a good match for this just because he is fairly tanky, and then you could hit him with an element that nobody else is going to use and basically just stop him from absorbing light. And so there are enemies left on the screen, but in this case, it's just not worth it. I'm already at like 139, and we're getting to the point where like if I take too many more turns, then it's not going to be a 20k score. At the time of before this was done, my record was like 1950, something like that, like really close to 20k, but not quite there. So this was like the more optimized version of the run. And now it is over. Got the guy taken care of. If you position Dios well enough, he could just outright one-shot the guy sometimes, but that didn't end up happening here. And now we have got the 20k score. And this was far from perfect. Like, if you can see, there was times where I wasted some turns. There was a little bit of inefficiency on who killed the last enemy and then affecting the turn order, that kind of thing. So it wasn't perfect, but it was good enough. And just keep in mind that the main incentive to do this is just to save event skip tickets. Because for getting 20k, you get a random relief ticket. It might not even be something you want. It's more just to like, was able to do this, and then to finish out the rest of the prizes, it'll take you less skip tickets. So yeah, that's all I've got for this. If you haven't done this quest yet, I wish you good luck and good strategy, and I will see you all next time.